Please let's sit in our position.
Okay,
Please let's sit in our general position. We're about to start second session. Please, this time.
on motions for having the United Africa and the developed Africa, a functional Africa. In order to do this, we've created a committee, and the committee will be meeting for us to set agenda for issues or resolutions. We'll be doing that within the next 10 minutes. The committee members come together. Other delegates, if you so wish, you can still meet with one another, but in a seated manner. Okay. I believe we all have one thing or the other that we want to move the motion for. So how this line, as we said earlier, I think the most important is to have our freedom fund established. Agreed?
Yes.
Okay. So let's all have that. We have a freedom fund.
With a percentage for women's issues.
I agree. With a percentage reserved for women's issue was proposed.
The mommy wants a particular percentage reserved for women issues.
From freedom fund.
What do you think about that? And we can incorporate it
Into the wedding.
yeah. She wants a particular percentage allocated to women out of the freedom.
To raise or to disburse.
How we discuss it again, the freedom fund we get
To be operated and disbursed
from
by-
the US especially.
But when it is being disbursed, a percentage should, I'm proposing a percentage be reserved for women's issues.
Okay. So maybe when we now throw it to the open floor, we determine what percentage it is.
What if we do not want money? That is it.
What else do we get our cash from?
Already we have in Ghana. We have I think that are already in the nations of the world. They can front the lead.
In this 1958 that we are here, Ghana, South Africa.
My country has many resources.
Yeah, but are we managing it?
We are not.
Still in the hand of the colonial master.
The issue, I think, is do we want to source it from the West, from
Okay,
China?
that's irrespective of where we source from.
I agree with you,
We know that
Chairman.
we're sourcing.
Chairman, I agree with you. We source and we can decide where from, what a percentage be reserved for women's issues.
Yeah. So we deliberate on the percentage.
And the sourcing.
I move to condemn South African apartheid. What say the remaining members?
Sorry, let's listen to. Okay.
I was saying that I move to condemn South African apartheid because it is one of the nations of the continent in which the West has integrated itself in. And what is ours is ours. We cannot deny or ignore. What is going on is not acceptable. I am for non-violent Pan-Africanism and not a united States of Africa, reason being that overnight integration will not stick. Thereby, it is important for us to make independence widespread. No, this is for us also, right? It's
Yes.
just us.
Just not-
It's not us.
Chair, please. I'd like to say comment opinion on condemning there is the same thing is being in my country. Southern Nigeria, northern Nigeria, and the Yazala. The three of us have got together, they have a common interest, and only 2% of us are electorate. We can vote in 5%. I love to have less than 5% of the right. So I think that will be.
That is a good one.
I would support that also.
I think
I would
based
support that,
on what
but I would also like to go further if the chairman would allow. And also, in addition to the women's rights issues in terms of allocation of education, percentage of women in parliament, percentage of bursaries allocated to female students, and all such other female issues. There should be a resolution that these female issues should be enshrined in legislation. I'd like to propose that.
and can I
And why
propose for a female conference to follow that as well?
You want to really push for this resolution is that we want an all African women conference to hold after.
I support that.
Women like us can do because it was understand better. It should be, you can also reach an agreement for the percentage of the freedom fund that goes to women rights. So please include that.
I support that.
Our women conference.
I support that.
For clarification.
All African women conference. All African women conference.
So we should
Let's
put that
propose that.
separate from the freedom. fund,
Yes, it
correct?
is.
Yes, but it's
Yes,
separate,
It's
but
separate.
intertwined.
Because the Congo has concerns about the funds, the source of the funds for the freedom fund.
No,
But
it's separate.
we have no hesitancy to support
Hmm.
our system.
I think the location for the next conference should be something that we should all decide individually and then pass.
I'm sorry, may I add to the previous resolution?
Sure.
I think it might be valuable to include the Congo in the resolution against apartheid in South Africa, where we make specific cases, or we make a specific resolution for the Congo. I would support that because many of the same instruments that are used by the South Africa are used by the South Africa.
What exactly do you want us to do?
So is there a resolution against apartheid in South Africa?
There is already.
Mhm.
Okay.
So
I believe that need to be extended.
My chairman, let me say that.
Only support North Africa.
Look, you know, we are not an independent country yet, but we are pushing for
It's not just
independence.
focused on East, West, Central,
And constitutional,
The all
and
Africa
they do not.
and the all Africa.
conference.
And what they want to commit to set up a resolution to condemn the non-inclusion of women in the committee for constitutional negotiations. So right now,
That's why we are having an all African women's conference where the host
Don't please note it in this place now. We want a statement to that the all African people congress use a strong statement against the lack of women. And the inclusion of women. No. We need to include it because, no, wait, my sister, if we.
Mr. Nkomo, Mr. Nkomo, Mr. Nkomo,
Let's listen to
the time is now.
Madam
There's no better time to voice their concerns than now.
I know you understand me.
I don't know if you agree.
That we are going to say the all African People Conference condemn the non-inclusion of women in the Constitutional Review Committee. Can you?
Of what?
Of Nigeria, the Constitutional Review Committee of Nigeria. Women were not included. Condemn it. We push a strong statement for not including women. Thank you very much. my
I
chairman.
think,
Yeah, please.
yeah.
I would like to say this. the issue of Pan-Africanism is being raised.
Mm.
Right? To me, it seems as if we're putting the cat for the horse. Oh, it is a very good thing. It is very interesting. But I think fighting for independence of all the people like Nigeria, like Southern Rhodesia, Northern Rhodesia, in other land, and all the rest of us should come first.
I
I
agree.
am proposing that the issue of Pan-Africanism is a very good thing. Should be on the pipeline. We shouldn't just let it be factual. Let's
I would agree.
of independence for all the parts of Africa.
The national liberation will be, national liberation requires that.
Other countries are not independent.
The GM will intercede to remind the esteemed members of the steering committee that the delegates are anxious to begin debating
Mm.
these issues. So I would encourage you to decide on your agenda within the next 2 minutes.
Okay, so I think to support Mr. Nkomo,
with the peculiarities of
How
our
many
different
resolutions
nations.
you have not noted that of Pan-Africanism and independence?
I move against the United States of Africa and for individual nations to be independent first,
Independent first.
as opposed to the United States of Africa, which is instant and may not
We are
stick.
not, we are not going for the United States of Africa. Let's have a loose confederation where each constituency will be able to, monitor the money given to them,
Mm.
do things independently
Mm.
first.
And then come
A loose
together as
confederation is better than a united States of Africa.
Mm.
Because if we have a
I think we
United
should-
States
I
of
think we
Africa,
should note that
each
down.
man will
I
be
think
in
we should-
control.
I think we should note it down.
Chairman.
So
Council believes that you're stronger together.
we'll propose it to the delegates and then
And if
we
we want
all
to
debate.
be
So I think let's be
on
mindful
which
of
aspects,
people's time
apart
and
from having a freedom
yeah.
fund, what else are we going to look into with the freedom fund?
Can we have the next conference to hold in Nigeria?
With
think-
a woman's.
Yes.
And-
As before you come to the floor.
And invitations,
I think that's a good idea. Nigeria has to resolve.
invitations
We throw that open to the floor.
and invitations to North Africa, because we don't want them feeling outside of Africa.
They need to be brought into the. fold.
Exactly, the same way we're looking out for the South,
South,
Central,
we should look for
East
the
and
North,
West, we look
yes.
into. So we hold the conference in Nigeria and
With a
invite,
women's wing
yes, all of the Northern African countries as well,
and encourage them for women.
so that they can see
participation.
Yes.
independence,
The next
yes.
conference. Okay, what are we using the freedom fund to do?
We are
We
using
know that women are already
Covered.
We are covered.
No problem. Down.
Supporting other,
poverty,
supporting
Education,
other
education,
countries to gain independence.
education
Development
in what area?
in
infrastructure.
Agriculture and infrastructure,
Agriculture.
yes, and healthcare,
and healthcare.
Okay.
with priority to women and children.
And consideration should be given to small countries or colonies that are financially backward.
Like,
Well, we're talking about Congo, my friend here is talking about Congo. They have-
Congo is very rich.
Congo is the richest of them all. It is just being
First of all,
engineered in a negative
yeah, it's
capacity.
Said it now.
And you said, in the hands of colonial.
All
Once
they
they are-
need
once
to
they are
fight for
independent,
their
like-
independence and get what belongs to them.
That's why they need money.
The Congo would.
That's why we are getting a freedom fund, don't worry.
Congo would like to work with freedom funds.
and
What other areas do we,
Build an indigenous military.
military?
Military.
Then.
government.
It depends.
Government is.
The government agenda will be
I think we need to reword that's.
Government infrastructure.
government infrastructure,
Yeah,
in which
in
sense?
terms of legal,
Yes, I think we need to reword.
legal support.
Mr. Nkrumah, you need my attention?
the minister.
Okay, just a minute.
So, the office of the chairman, as much as I love to celebrate.
Yes.
Amazing work.
You have those
I read your profile.
prowess.
When they mentioned that we declared
In the name of blessing.
I just.
Let me get better at it.
That would be.
I look forward to the conversation after the game.
Which is short.
The Brazilian culture.
Right.
What's your name?
My name is Tunji. Enjoy it.
Separate.
I know that.
And-
Why? Why do I know that?
I guess things
How
like
about-
after
But I think.
To build up
On this one, there's
legislative infrastructure.
legislative
A
infrastructure.
legislature, once the countries are independent, what are the rules that are going to guide them? To encourage the building of constitutions, the building of the laws that support the setting of the ground norms. That are part of the things that the Freedom Fund can, because it's one thing to be free. It's another thing to know what to do with that freedom.
I think this adds to how we can become self-sustainable in regards to finance from a trade perspective. Let us-
Include your military
Defense.
agenda,
Well,
but it's
the
Oh,
agenda
I
is,
want-
I don't believe decolonization can occur through agricultural
That is-
development.
dependent on
We
the.
must open debate. The GM wants to debate. We can't continue talking. This is including. Debate has to start.
Okay, so let us push for trade unions to start integrating continental trade as best as possible, so we start generating our own revenue. And
Over to-
Chairman, I think
Chairman, you may-
All the issues will be resolved in the general house.
All right, House. After a heated deliberation on what we are going to do in order to gain our freedom, the House is proposing that we have a freedom fund. And I believe every member of the steering committee have agreed with this. Is there any opposition anywhere? You don't need a freedom fund. So it is unanimously agreed on. So we're having a freedom fund.
The percentage.
That's why we're having a freedom fund. We are going to source for the money, leave that to the committee. All we need is to have it established.
Mr. Chairman,
So the steering committee, together with myself as the secretary general of the committee, will be working on.
the percentage for women.
Percentage for women. I'm still working on it.
We would like.
There's nothing we can do about women. Women will continue to be women. Madam Mommy and Madam Gambo, we just have to let them be, otherwise we might get strangled in this struggle for independence. So you are well recognized, your opinions are noted. Or is there anyone that has an opposing view to them?
The GM wishes.
You clear them.
The GM wishes a clarification on one point. You advance what you say is a resolution on freedom fund. Do you have more details on what this is?
Yes.
Reasonable dollars.
We do.
Can you provide those?
Yes, you will. So let me come up with some of our resolutions before I mention the things that we'll be diverting the freedom funds into. This committee in its resolution stands to condemn apartheid in South Africa. Secondly, we advocate for women's rights issues in all African constitutions. Thirdly, this committee has come to oppose a loose confederation instead of a united African Union. So for the freedom fund, the first thing we have here, we are saying on a percentage to women issues. There will be a percentage for women issues. But quickly, what percentage do we give them? 15, 5, 10, 2.
Where will the?
Or the committee resolve that?
If the woman is
Let me say, oh, I thought about the same thing, our election, I don't understand where the money is coming from.
That's why the committee is creating the Freedom Fund.
Yes, but
We can get it from America. We said everyone that's getting
We want, not only foreigners, we don't want.
not only foreigners, but they can also be a part of it.
no, I disagree.
We're speaking about.
Mr. Chair,
That's final.
For a united Africa, we cannot seek out from our oppressors. It is wrong.
The US is part of.
The American operation.
Yeah.
To support the apartheid system in South Africa.
Exactly.
That is what we stand for.
That's interesting. So why don't you get what they have to chase them out of your land?
Or what they have stolen from our land.
Someone that take it from us.
But we can ask for our independence like Ghana. I mean, the Prime Minister is here, we have Tunisia. Why can't we get the money from this other state to support the other African brothers and sisters?
And
Instead of
how
asking for help from outside.
How well can Prime Minister Nkrumah support the whole of Africa? This is a big continent
It's
we're
very-
talking about.
Mr.
Mr. Abdulrahman, we source for her funds from whoever will give it to us.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to advocate that we may initially source for funds externally, but let us look to convert that to an internal revenue generation system by way of continental trade.
Continental trade with US.
No,
They're still going to do some
trade on the continent
We have
to
within the
build
continent.
our own.
Fine, we are colonized people. We are not in control of anything yet.
And the idea of this union is to stop being colonized people. Never in history has the oppressors helped the oppressed. So if we truly want to stand free, we need to come together, source for our funds together. We are a rich people. We have resources. We can make money.
Have resources in the hand of the colonizer.
Exactly.
Get it back, Mr. Franz Fanon.
That is why we are fighting, to get it back and put it in our hands. Our colonizers are here because of our resources. If we unite, we will be in control of these said resources.
Yeah.
And we are able to have the funds to truly free ourselves.
Is it,
Mr. Franz
is it,
Fanon?
is it possible for you to speak?
Yes,
over you,
Mr.
Chairman? Is
Enao.
it possible for you to snatch the driver's seat without learning how to drive first? A United States of Africa instantly will not stick. It will be easily viewed as a means to de-strategize us in our collective effort. We understand your piece and we have every nation's independence in the forefront of what we want to
I
do.
understand your point, my friend. But when the driver does not give you an opportunity to learn to drive, when will you learn to drive?
That is why you have to steer the driver in the brake.
But they've been steering us for years. When will it be enough?
Now they are rising.
No, I decide. This is
Franz Fanon, who goes with Mr. Franz Fanon?
you have to stand on it.
Who goes with Mr. Franz Fanon?
Patrice Lumumba.
Yeah.
You go with Mr. Franz Fanon?
Mr. Franz
That's
Fanon.
why we don't have the military.
They don't have to
It's
fight
as if
for
you are-
our witness.
But you
Witness.
you go first, let's just start. How many people?
I'm not right. Look at
The conduct of that-
Franz Fanon.
US.
I'm setting the ball for you. Just to fight the me.
No,
Okay, who supports Mr. Franz Fanon? Don't get anything outside of Africa. You don't vote for yourself. Answer.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Six. Okay. That's all.
She raised her hand up.
She did not.
People do not. They don't do not. You do.
She has the right to
For
revoke.
women to have
right.
rights, the African traditional way, we empower our women. You should stand up as well.
My chairman, can I say something?
Should I
As
withdraw
a
your
woman
percentage?
that has been
Should I
imprisoned
withdraw
over
your
16 times,
percentage? No.
I have
because
been beaten and
that.
oppressed. I have learned one thing. The end justifies the means. We want freedom. We need money from our oppressors. After all, they built their nation on our sweat. They built it on slavery. They built it on our resources. We can't lie about it. Diplomacy is the way. Get the funds from the West and get freedom for all of us.
Like your point.
That's why we are.
I like your points, however, but justifying the means is what we want in this situation.
No.
Because of this, we decided to allow slavery. Look at us now.
Mr. Fano,
Yeah, you can negotiate.
your argument
State that you.
will be collated in your book.
It is tilting the hand down.
End of discussion.
Chairman.
How many people?
They didn't talk to-
Six
You
people.
have
Six.
6 votes.
She has revoked her vote.
Backwards.
Mr. Fano, we are very interested in cooperating,
Mr. Fano said, and we
but not in
the
this way.
vote.
May
Am I speaking?
may
You are
I?
speaking, our chairman.
End of discussion, Mr. Fano. Secondly, the committee in the disbursement of the Freedom Fund that will be gotten from within and outside of Africa.
No.
I know. Chairman Boya.
So,
Chairman Boya, I think,
Mr. Abdurrahman,
I believe we need to hear from the delegates from Egypt. We need to hear from the
should
delegates.
this to the African leaders?
We need to hear to Egypt and find out what kind of resources President Nasser is willing to.
Our
contribute
committee
to our
member,
cause.
we all made this resolution together.
Yes.
So
All
you
right.
have some of back against us at this point.
But
Yeah.
but we need to include all of our.
You should.
Mr.
The
Member.
you represent, we are speaking.
But it is, President Nasser, Egypt is a very rich country.
Okay, Mr. Abdurrahman, we have voted, 6 people supported Mr. Fernand's opinion, so that means that the opinion is short. Understood?
6 out of having.
6 out of the whole delegates. That means that his opinion is short.
I know before.
Mr. Fernand has a response. Just swallow it with a bit of salt.
The chairman has spoken,
The chairman has spoken.
and we will look for ways to accommodate your independence. Other not. Countries
No,
in
we are
our-
getting from without and within Africa.
We're not getting from that. We are getting-
Mr. We faster the vote. So there's nothing you can do about it. Yes,
Chairman, move to the next.
We are getting
resolution.
Next resolution, please.
okay. You said it that we are going to advocate for women's rights issues in all African constitutions, and we are operating on a loose confederation. We've deliberated on the percentage for women issues, and we anonymously agreed on 15%. And also, this committee is putting it forward. Are we having an all-African women's conference where women can deliberate on their issues? Then the parties across the hall are really having it. Let's throw it open. Should we?
Yes.
We support them. Unanimously supported.
Thank you, Nikki.
Congratulations.
I love you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, my people. Thank you. And also in the nation of Nigeria, this committee stands to condemn the non-inclusion of women in the Nigerian Constitutional Committee. I'm going to plan and pass. Now we want to deliberate on this. We are casting a vote. Do we have the next conference in Nigeria?
No.
Mr. Said said, where are we having it? Tunisia?
Sounds like.
Why? Tunisia stands
Yes, it should be posted.
or Nigeria stands?
It should be posted.
Why
So
not?
I
There are no wanting as independence. And secondly, women are not included in the Nigerian constitution.
Exactly.
we just mentioned we are working
Nigeria
towards
is
that,
divided because members of the NPC did not attend this conference.
which is why we are inviting Tunisia and the rest.
They did not attend this conference. So
Madam,
as independent nation,
Chairman, after him, I would like to.
Defend your nation.
Yes,
as independent as an independent.
you have spoken. May I have the chance to please speak?
And now speak.
It is very important to note that within the next year and a half, we look to secure our independence as the largest populated country on the continent. Yes, thank you very much. Yes, we are currently in West Africa, and hold on, let me make my point. When I am done, you will make your point, and the rest of the delegates and attendants will level the playing field by way of votes. Yes, we are currently in West Africa, and I am making a motion for the next conference to be held in West Africa, but not because I want my country to host the event, but because of the number of people that our oppressors will see are willing to work together from a national perspective. Independence has to start from a national perspective and become widespread throughout the continent so that nations like Congo can be free and start to generate revenue that will be widespread and sustain us internally. If we are collecting external and reach out to the north, if we are collecting external funds now, we don't know to do it for the next 5, 10, 30 years or forever. We have to close the barriers between Northern, Central, Eastern, and Western Africa, which is why we show our support for South Africa. And we want you to know that you have support for Algeria and Tunisia gaining independence in the coming years.
Is there any other nation that is asking for the conference to be brought to them? And after that, we are not taking any argument again. Nigeria, any other place?
I'm not supporting any country. I'm talking about what is happening in Sweden. I mean, I feel like I'm in Sweden, like this committee has done over against those people their own issue. I'm not talking about what we concern our country, other delegates concern.
What's education?
I mean, I'm talking about our own issue. I feel like the delegates are supposed to talk about what is affecting them, what they want, and then presenting it to us for our family. We're not talking about the real issue affecting Africa.
Well, maybe just let us finish with what we're doing, then you'll know whether we actually benefited on it or not.
Is there any nation that
So
women's
let's
rights?
just have a vote. Where do we take it to? Supporting Tunisia? Let me see your hand. Your hand, please. Mr. Jeffrey Nkomo, take the vote.
Tunisia. Mr. Chairman, can the member of the committee vote? Well, they did not vote the last time. So the vote was allowed, so we need to proceed with the delegates. Thank
He
you.
voted. He was the only one that voted for you.
Okay.
So he voted last time.
Okay, Tunisia, if you are voting for Tunisia, please put up your hand for the person.
Tunisia for what? Please be explicit.
For the next conference, that's where we're going.
Or Nigeria.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Any other person? 8. Are you sure you don't want to vote? 1, 2, 3.
Tunisia or Nigeria?
Tunisia or Nigeria? 8 for
Yes,
Tunisia.
for Tunisia. Okay, we're taking it to Nigeria. Vote.
My chairman, I think the number of votes this time around is somehow. Also, because the number we have here is around 15. And if 8 votes for Tunisia,
We've not voted for
We need
Nigeria
to
yet.
vote. You need to take second vote.
We need to do the second vote.
We need to vote for Nigeria.
I need to clarify this because someone had to leave, we had a few no-shows. So the prime minister doesn't vote. Prime minister exercises influence in the background. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 voting delegates. So 7 constitutes a victory, 8 in this case.
Observative voting. That's vote again. Count the
observer.
But I'm reminding you that there are 12 total votes.
Yeah, sure, not.
So in other words, 8 for Tunisia is a winner.
Like what I'm saying.
One house. Okay. For the next conference, we are moving to Tunisia. Now, part of the. What we are going to use the Freedom Fund for, if you have any other objection, you can raise it. The first thing here is education. Secondly, agriculture. We have to develop that sector. We are reaching the resources. Then health and care development. We are going to put some into the finance of small colonies so that they can actually be liberated. And also we are putting some into legislative infrastructure. And lastly, Mr. Lumumba suggested putting some into military operations. I know that Mr. Fanon will like that.
It is necessary.
Mr. Duncan is not like.
But we are still going to cast our votes on all this. We're voting for education. We support it. Hands up.
Again.
We are for
Voting
education.
for-
No.
What are we voting for?
We're voting for education
I think the only thing that people don't support, that has divergent view here
Mm.
is the
Is the
issue of
military.
military or no military. The rest.
I believe
And that's the only.
There is an issue because non-violence is the way forward.
At those
The
times,
defense.
shall we all keep quiet? Mr. Nahoro? Okay, the only thing that is actually causing a little bit of disagreement is funding the military.
I believe that the fund should be committed to liberation.
Mr.
Agricultural
Lumumba,
development is not by itself liberation, education by itself is not liberation, and any freedom fund should be committed to.
why are you so worrying in your spirit? And I know that's why they're supporting military.
My people
You
suffer.
should have raised your hand, tell us you have an opinion, then we listen to your opinion. We don't want this military approach too early. This is too early. Let's be diplomatic.
But I believe that
Diplomacy, Mr. Lumumba.
diplomacy.
Yes, sir.
For legislation, for legislative infrastructure, we support that.
Yes,
The Congress-
unanimously.
Of your proposal, of the things for the Freedom Fund to support, we support funding legislative infrastructure.
Let's put it.
Unanimously, that is supported.
We will support that. The other issues we think are not part of the liberation of our country.
Others are not part of the liberation of our country. Being educated is not part of liberation. Are you sure?
It's an important.
If I didn't gain my Oxford education, do you think I'll be here talking today?
What is pressing for their nation and us is the liberation of the people.
Yes, I lack the education of my brother.
Exactly.
Salom. I just am a beer salesman. I lack the education of you. The people of the Congo lack education. Yet we want our freedom and liberation no less than our educated brothers and sisters want their liberation.
That's why one thing I can from this is that you can see that the people from Congo, they are kind of quite violent. The same thing with Mr. Kano.
And we want to advocate for non-violent. Non-violent independence is what we are here to achieve.
My chairman,
Madam Bobby,
every independent country requires a standing army. A standing army needs to be trained. It needs to be maintained. It needs to be fed and watered. I support part of the freedom funding going towards military techniques as a defense.
As a defense force.
I think
Chairman Goya.
because of gold.
Chairman Goya.
We are going to divert some funds into, please, Mr. Duncan, at this point, we are casting a vote.
Mr. Duncan, let us cast a vote. Let's move forward.
I also have a question. So I want to remind you all that all reaction games like this, there's something we call a podium poll. So anytime a player, usually a student, right, believes they aren't being heard, right, they're raising their hand, no one's calling on them, they can go to the podium rule. At that point, they can come to the front and say, vote the podium rule. The GM will say, you must allow them to speak, and that person will be able to speak about whatever their kind of issue is. So I want to remind you all of the podium rule. It is still in effect, always in effect.
Podium.
So. Okay, let's recognize the representative of the South African Liberal Party, Patrick Duncan. Who is here now. And now.
So I am firmly against violence for the reason
Yes.
that we don't need military. I am the student of Mahatma Gandhi. What he did in India successfully gaining independence through non-violence is what we can do here. I understand, especially from the South African point of view, that non-violence is the way to get what we want. We do not need bloodshed, more bloodshed in Africa.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. You've spoken well. Why should we get independence at the expense of our blood when we can get it with simple diplomacy?
Yes, yes, we are against violence as well. That is why we want to stay prepared. Should we not be given the freedom we desire? We have been clamoring for this for years. So that is why we want to put ourselves in order so that we can seek non-violence from a better standing.
Mr. Chairman, can I
Deterrent.
can I advocate for the fund to be allocated to a defense fund for the Congo as opposed to
A defense fund rather than a military.
so that we can move forward as opposed to debating. Defense, if you come into my house, you won't like what you see if you misbehave, as opposed to I'm going to go out and look for it.
The Congo has no
Thank you. Well, I think we need to understand some of the resolutions we passed here. Our foremost concern is the freedom of Africa. Yes. Now, when we are not talking about freedom fund, we're now saying we're going to set part of it aside for defense. Now, we're talking about freedom first. And I still want to say, I am advocating for non-violent means of achieving this. It is possible. And I want to say, if we allow the precious blood of any African to be spilled on the street of freedom, then who works on it? Let us take this into consideration.
It
Non-violence
depends
will
on
be
its training.
a good
Is
way
training
to go.
is training the military for preparedness
For
and
preparedness.
show of force, not necessarily application.
I want to believe
Yes,
that
Mr.
Ghana, Tunisia, Angola, who already have their independence, already setting this in place. Let us focus the issue of freedom through non-violence means first.
Mr.
Other things
Nkubo, for
will follow.
for financial sustainability, the Congo needs to be able to
Chairman.
manage its resources.
And to protect them.
Can I have the floor?
Let's listen to Madam Sawaba.
Thank you, my people, once more. I just want to make a point about being prepared for the worst. I have learned to always expect the worst. And one of the things I must say is that if Africa had been prepared with a strong and powerful army, do you think we would have been invaded?
No, no.
And so I want us to think about this critically. If we put a part of the Freedom Fund for military intervention, it will be kept in preparation. We can build our arsenal. We can build the weapons. We are not going to fight now. Then we can also render support to my brother, Patrick here.
Yes.
And now I also want to help the interest of independent nations like Ghana and Angola to support them
And
even
Egypt.
more.
And Egypt.
Thank you very much.
Non-violent but prepared. NIP.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Nkubo.
I want to make sure that that you cannot attain freedom without being psychologically and mentally free. You cannot attain freedom with weapons when you are not psychologically and mentally free. Those countries that attain freedom, they are psychologically and mentally diplomatic before they attain freedom. So I guess we should go by this way. We should apply diplomacy when attaining freedom instead of using military tactics.
Military
As
preparedness.
the chairman of this committee, the reason why I oppose the military funding is because once you have the military in place, automatically, psychologically, emotionally, you know that you can fight. And as a result of that, you will not put in your best in resolving issues through discussion and communication. Because you know that you have already built an arsenal to fight with. So we'll be looking at that as a source of strength. For us to be pumping money into that, I don't think it's the best. We want a non-violent independence movement.
Mr. Chairman, you cannot form military when you are
Open to the House. Mr. Nkomo, we vote.
Thank you for the privilege. If you are in support of
Defense.
Military.
setting aside money for military approach.
on the defense fund.
For
Exactly. We all agree that it
We
is not
want to
military.
Please,
If
I
it
am
was
told
not
you
violent
what the
community,
chairman recognizes now. Now, if you
Mr. Chairman,
are in support
we are asking
of
for
non-violence means
preparedness.
of achieving independence in Africa, would you cast your votes now?
silence forever.
Non-violent.
Non-violence.
No.
Violence.
Non-violent.
Non-violence. If you are in support of non-violence,
Are we allowed to make it non-violent but military prepared? Because we do not want to deploy military
Now,
anywhere.
okay,
We are saying A supermarket that does not have a gate man will continue to be raided by thieves. We want a gate man. We are not saying we want our gate man to go and be killing people on the street, saying don't enter that
Prime
supermarket.
Minister Nkrumah, did you gain your independence through the military?
I'm not supposed to get too involved in the open debate. But like the chairman rightly pointed out, I, as leader of the National People's Congress of Ghana, advocated and carried out what we call a positive action. It was not violent. It was a system that had, yes, there was civil disobedience, there was all kinds of pressure put on them, which was not violent. How we got our independence.
Military? No. So you can get independence without the military.
What is available in one country, but not the same with another country.
Yes, not fair. I vote according to your wish. We vote again for military or just outright non-violent. Diplomats.
We don't have three roads here. We have two options. Violence, non-violence. Every other discussion can follow. Let us settle the issue of violence and non-violence. If you support non-violent approach to the pursuit of independence in Africa, would you cast your vote now?
Non-violent.
Non-violence. Non-violence.
For violence.
Non-violence.
No, I'm for non-violence. I don't, guys, I think
Non-violent.
Non-violence, you put up your hand, we're still voting.
we all had an.
Don't canvass again.
We all had an.
Don't canvass.
Just vote. Non-violent.
So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
That's the end.
No,
Non-violent.
Non-violence.
Yes.
We want violence.
Okay. Violence. Put up your hand. Violence. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Let us proceed.
Well, we agree to that.
When we are free.
Back to some other solutions.
Yes, Prime Minister.
This backstab.
I would rather is countenance the good so that we do not allow bad blood amongst ourselves. It's just a new beginning. I think we should be more we should all go along together. For every territory, for every country, let us adopt what will suit our climate. I think that would be better. Yes. The line of violence and non-violence.
both are no.
So those
And
are
both
not.
are no. You do not understand. Both are not.
Do what our own nation.
Okay.
After all, we are practicing a loose confederation. So do what you see. We are not approving violence. So violence is approved. So at this point, I think the committee members will just meet again for a brief meeting over all the votes and what we've done so far, and we give you the final feedback. Madam Momi, I love your back. You wanted to break my back.
I don't think we
Madam
together.
Sawaba, I love your back.
We
You
did
wanted
not
to
work
break
together.
my back.
We have to do what we have to do.
Oh.
That's not how independence works.
We have discovered that
Military intervention.
now that that's stronger to be loaded.
We start
Not
this
all the
way.
time.
This is, yeah.
But it was
Yeah.
annulled by
The hosts council.
council.
You can't annul a vote of the delegate.
It is an,
The council.
we agreed on the annulment. We agreed on the annulment.
We agreed on the annulment.
The council-
You only cancelled us.
We're playing here by a simple majority vote, though.
Is it?
We're playing by a simple majority vote, though. So if the majority of delegates approve the resolution is approved. You can't, there's no way for the steering committee to just unilaterally annul.
Wonderful.
And that's
Yes.
the issue. is
So we want,
not about violence or no violence. The issue is about majority of the people supported non-violence, but when we go to the point of setting aside money for defense.
Yes, and the majority supported that. Because every
Money
independent
should-
country
we will
requires
not-
understanding our
Not violence.
There's a matter of the resolution. The Freedom Fund issue can be separated from the issue of violence. Right? These kind of perspectives on violence don't necessarily need to be wrapped into the Freedom Fund. You know, and I mean, we'll talk at the end of the game about what kind of action happens. But these can be separate issues. So don't feel like, I know you were trying to wrap women's rights into the Freedom Fund and education. The Freedom Fund can be its own thing versus women's, these should be, I would say these should be separate resolutions, which might eliminate some of the disagreements. I mean, ultimately, in the conference, there was the urge to kind of compromise and create resolutions that were not vague, but loosely written, you know what I mean? So that they could be interpreted in different ways, perhaps.
It's politics. Okay.
That's what I was doing now.
Because now we are having a committee deliberation.
What he's saying is that issue of violence, non-violence, should just be
On a neutral ground.
on the neutral ground. The issue of assigning money to it or not should not be part of this. Should not be what the determine that we want by violence.
But among all of these resolutions are, we have not issued a resolution condemning European activities on the African continent. So that is something very simple. I think that would have the support of everyone here.
It wasn't discussed initially. And even the discussion we had initially, some people ended up doing what we spoke
It is given.
against
It is
or
given
for.
that we have taken that resolution.
Okay.
When we.
By us being here, exactly, that is redundant to mention.
It is given that we have
Three
taken that
people
resolution.
supported it. 3 people disagreed rather.
No,
Others supported.
everyone that is supporting African freedom is actually supporting what he has said.
No. We said
Freedom Fund is based, the Freedom Fund is based on collaboration with Europe.
You are talking about.
Not necessarily cannot do with China and Russia.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, we can get from anywhere. That's
Yeah,
our
And
division.
and-
That's our division that we get from.
And
anywhere we can get it from.
Russia actually be giving some country support and training. Yes, just like, so they have been training.
Also China.
There.
May history not repeat itself, Sha, because I am for initially collecting externally, but then looking internally to sustain, not perpetually.
Play an abbreviated version of the game, so you won't be able to pass, the number.
Yeah, but they don't use the communication. Exactly.
So we said I'm going to be non-violent.
Okay.
We get a fund.
Then, of the local the committee condemns the action of Europeans.
Definitely. Definitely.
Standing, yeah, but the action is from the other. That's why we're standing against it. Then we condemn the apartheid policy in South
In
Africa.
South Africa.
It makes themselves. Tunisia is not spending. Conference.
Any other thing? So we are holding
Push, we need to develop the resolution, the legislation that states that colonial power, colonial government should stop the oppression of all people in Nigeria and also.
yeah.
So I think we need to add that to the resolution, stop the oppression of people.
We passed
They
that,
are not
madam.
just, they are
We are
not
not
just
getting up
stopping it.
resolutions again.
We are not just stopping it. We are getting independent.
Okay.
Any other thing?
No. So
And I think the mind of the delegates should be disabused. We really do their biddings.
Yes, yes, we're working for them.
Yes, so they couldn't see us as working for ourselves.
Yes.
In part of the delegates and part of the committee there from Nigeria wanted the conference next year in Nigeria.
And was cancelled.
And it's taken to Tunisia. The South Africa is not part of this committee. And
We are advocating for them as well.
Yeah, you should not see us as what the fuck.
After much deliberation by the committee, first and foremost, we want every delegate to have it at the back of their mind that we are not supporting motions moved by committee members. Like Mr. Nkoma told me now, the Nigerian delegate, Mr. Tony Henaro, he wanted this conference in his nation for next year, and we voted against it. He's here on the committee. So we are not working for ourselves, we are working for the freedom of Africa. Africa must be free. So in ensuring total freedom and independence for all African nations, the committee stands to pass this resolution. As earlier said, these are the things we support as a committee. We stand to condemn apartheid in South Africa. We stand to condemn action of Europeans in all African nations. We stand to advocate for women's rights reviews in all African constitutions. We stand to oppose a loose confederation. We stand to say our approach is non-violence.
This is
We
the
voted for
this big communicate.
And
final communication.
towards the independence movement, we will be supporting education, agriculture, and healthcare development, financing small colonies, legislative infrastructure. That's what we'll be upholding as African delegates in all our nations. Thank you for making it to this very important meeting. I want to believe at this point, we bring the meeting to a close. Our next conference will be holding in Tunisia.
Chairman,
There is
let us
last.
the all African women conference will be held.
The chairman is saying no, this is what we have. Let's talk about this with debrief. I think that, hey, I'm running the clock. Would all play out. He's called it an incredible job playing your roles. Just really kind of great. Just like so happy with kind of results.
And I'll spend.
Look at the case. The question
you
is
didn't
why
love my
the actual odds of the People's Conference, that is the most contentious issue. And certainly this is, you know, this is how that is for. In the resolution.
Let's go with that.
Determine middle ground. So endorsing kind of a peaceful approach like the Prime Minister wished for, but saying, well, in certain situations, violence must be necessary. So that's the most kind of contentious issue. And they managed to kind of chart a middle ground last year. And for the most part, most of these kind of issues, they agreed on. There are a few historical, I'll say something about the resolutions and then about how the game works. So the Freedom Fund, a Freedom Fund wasn't established with the idea that kind of all independent and eventually independent African states would contribute to it. Not everybody ultimately did. The big question with the Freedom Fund is who is going to control this? So the permanent secretariat remains in Ghana. So essentially, the Nkrumah's government and close kind of advisors maintain control of the Freedom Fund, which is the reason not everybody contributes, right? Because there are huge differences here where the center of the movement should go. Historically speaking, you went the right way with Tunis. That's when the next all African people.
Oh, wow.
How else do you think of Cairo, the third All African People's Conference. And ultimately, there's a lot that happens, right? We certainly see because West Africa, or at least Nigeria and East Africa, are kind of left out of the machinations here, that regionalism rather than kind of continentalism becomes a focus. There's a whole lot of reasons for that. Women, the women's issue pushed more major. That doesn't happen at all. You know, there are quite a few women at the conference, not in the kind of actual delegations, of course, the two of you, but many others. But the issue of women isn't addressed. Only 2 women delegates actually addressed the conference. 2 years later, you do have the first all African women's conference hosted in Ghana, where these issues begin to kind of arise. But one of the things we want to do, my co-author, myself, because we're building this game, is of course now the tendency is for kind of contemporary peoples, all of us who want to build the women's issue in, right? So we want to work in mechanics to basically frustrate those efforts, right? Because the best outcome of this game is the one that is most historically true, right? And students in the US will always go with that. They'll always want women's rights. Monier is always now on the kind of steering committee, right? So we have to make a mechanism where that can't happen. You know, we still want to have women's voices in the conference, of course. We can't get that resolution. That's not actually likely to happen. Definitely apartheid, even though our 2 representatives from the ANC in South Africa weren't here today, we still got to the issue of apartheid in South Africa. Ultimately, that becomes a contest too between Nigeria and Ghana in terms of who can support anti-apartheid movements. The ANC, for example, in Southern Africa the most. Alfred Hutchinson, who would have been playing the game today but wasn't able to be here, he arrives late to the conference. Remember the ANC, he was on trial for treason. He escapes the country and makes this kind of circuitous route and ends up in Ghana, but ultimately in Nigeria. This is the rest of his life in Nigeria. Right? I think he's in fact buried in Ghana, if I'm correct. So you got to that issue. The Loose Confederation, of course, Nkrumah's idea of Pan-Africanism, that particular idea of Pan-Africanism, this total continental unity, never comes to be. You know, you see over the next 8 years, the move toward regionalism, the national kind of sovereignty. So there never is, as you all know, a United States of Africa. You get regional ECOWAS, for instance, right? And ultimately, even when you get the OAU about 5 years later, the OAU is kind of a weak institution, as opposed to some groups who are represented here who wanted a stronger organization. So a lot of the like minor fault lines that divide players here become much wider the next decade. Let's see what else. So you advocated a lot of the Pan-African Party, which is something Nkrumah wanted bad, and certainly Fanon also. And this idea had been kind of kicked around for a little while. I think Nkrumah had come up with a couple years previous, if I'm correct. But it never comes to be. There never is Pan-African Army for Liberation. Then here, the condemned Europeans is interesting. One of the things that didn't come out a lot here is alignment, right? What does non-alignment? What is the Third World Project? What is its relationship to Europe, to the United States, to the Soviet Union, to China? We can't, of course, get at all these issues in an abbreviated game. So when we play this game with students, what happens now is what we call a debrief. And typically, so the students end the game, we get wherever we get, and the students get a handout, 4 or 5 pages that describes kind of what actually happened, some of the historical trajectory. For instance, George Padmore, the Black Caribbean intellectual, who was central to organizing this conference, dies, I think, a year later. But he was already kind of working on this thing that becomes the Bureau of African Affairs, that essentially becomes Nkrumah's kind of instrument for exerting influence all over the continent. So that's one of the kind of outcomes, not maybe of the conference, but of this historical moment. And then, of course, the what happens deals with the Congo and other events. One of the things we also ask students to do is to talk about gameplay. Are there kind of things, secrets about your characters that didn't come out of the game that you want to tell us? Like some of the kind of back end stuff, right? Mr. Afonso, can you tell us anything about who you are? I don't know, Antonio Afonso.
Anyway, that is one to my.
Tell us your secrets.
Okay, I am Antonio Afonso from Angola. At least my secret here is to get information from the territory.
Who are you really?
Who are we? Well, I'm Mr.
Holden Roberto. Of Angola. So he's here, only two people at the conference, Padmore and George Hauser, an American labor organizer who's not in the game, actually know who Antonio Afonso is. And what have you been doing for the game, Mr. Afonso?
Getting information typically from the steering committee to the CL, and also to align with some of the characters, people like the Prime Minister, because he is to, like, it's a boost to me in terms of when there is violence and the cost of fighting for freedom. Then I also work with Patrice. Patrice was actually my friend from the concept. You know, I left Angola at early to Congo, and I have been in Congo. So I have my party is the Union of the People of Northern Angola, and Patrice, I hope to Congo as a place of kind of home or resident. So even after going for this conference, I tend to go back to Congo, come back to Ghana also. Yeah.
So the deal is like essentially one of the resolutions you all passed against tribalism. It turns out that Roberto is very much a tribalist in this country, but as soon as he arrives at this conference, acts as a chameleon. He'll be whoever you want him to be, as long as you support his movement. And the whole time he's been sending, did you take any pictures? He's been trying to take pictures of your secret information sent to the CIA because he's being paid by the CIA. And that reminds me, Mr. Well, hold on a minute. The chair, Mr. Mboya, do you have any interesting links to outside powers?
Sure. I'm actually from America.
All you people.
You actually who?
Yeah, really, he was not, Mboya maybe an advocate, but wasn't aligned with the USSR. It wasn't aligned. So it's great. Working with, certainly receiving money funneled from the US, funneled from the CIA through American trade union movements into Africa. That's a large portion of the game. We talk a lot more about trade unionists because this kind of this conference is the beginning of debates about forming an all-African trade union Congress, for instance, and how it should align and so forth. Anything else? Is there anything else about anybody's characters that they want to share with us? Do you know what happens to your characters after the conference?
Yeah.
Anybody want to share?
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, I want to share. So please, South Africans share.
And Ahura, would you like to share?
Your character after 1958 conference. Remember that Tunisia insulted Nigeria that they can't close conference.
Yes.
Well,
everything was
the
done.
truth about it is we're here for Pan-African independence, and Nigeria gained its independence in 1960, 2 years after the conference. That's all I'm able to share at this time. Thank you.
Yeah, but Ahura, I mean, you all know, Ahura, of course, has a long career in politics in Nigeria, right? Mr. Fano,
Yeah.
what happens to you?
That's really simple, but I know at this conference, the main thing was to try to align and project myself as not too violent, because I already had that picture. Everybody already saw me as violent.
Yes.
That was also why in this scenario, I was supporting the women rights so that I can be able to garner support from them, especially Madam Mubik.
And I think everybody's gonna be disadvantaged here, because I have a good sense of what happens to all these characters. Of course, Benone dies, I think, 3 years later, of an illness, though. Other characters are not so lucky. I mean, Mr. Mboya, you're assassinated in 1969. Really promising for
My
assassin.
husband is killed.
Your husband is assassinated by the French Secret Service 2 years later.
Two years
In fact, you
And
were
I'm,
here,
and I'm murdered and made
yeah,
50 years,
recently, just
2005.
yeah, not long ago. So Lumiere.
At 78.
Yeah. Lumiere lives a long life and has a very brutal end to her life. Her husband, she was here with her husband, a whole contingent of people from the UPC. The husband is assassinated. Martha Wandi would have also been here with her husband. Her husband is also assassinated and murdered by the new government.
Assassinated, obviously.
Lumba also kind of.
Yes, exactly. And Sawaba was always jailed, was always beaten, always jailed.
But lives a pretty long life and is involved in and in fact, there's the Sawaba character I really enjoyed writing, because there's a really good biography of her that was written in 1992 that she was interviewed for, and she has all these details about this stuff. And in fact, in the newspapers in Ghana, the period, she's constantly in there, pictures of her. She's very active at the conference, but largely, like a lot of people in this country, even don't know who she is.
Yeah, it's
Kind of
very
forgot
sad.
her, right? But here she is in Ghana, taking this kind of leading role, advocating for Netflix, right? What else? Who else do we have?
And also I like this I don't really belong to a particular strong Kenyan tribe. The Kikuyu tribe is actually the main tribe in Kenya, but I don't belong there. I belong to the low tribe, which is highly insignificant. That's why I am not tribalistic and I don't support racism. Because I've actually suffered the tribal sentiment, so I don't support it.
Definitely, after the conference, but we went on to establish relationship with Chinese leadership, mostly non-Western government, we deal with the relationship. And this is communist also. So that kind of shapes what we write a lot about Africa, focusing that the most important things are economic development before talking about political African. And it's about all African independence movement and everything.
So in terms of some of the other stuff that happens at the conference, I know Mrs. Du Bois had to leave. She actually had a presentation for the second thing. But one of the things she manages to do, in spite of Mr. Mboya's kind of suspicions of communism, Du Bois manages to convince you to take down which one is this? This
China.
Taiwanese flag, right? And put up the Republic of China flag, right? Because her and her husband have aligned strongly with the USSR and China at this point. But do you know who helps her at the conference? Who else it takes? So it's not just Du Bois who helps to convince you to take that flag down and replace it with the Chinese flag. As Londa Robeson, Paul Robeson's wife, who's also very active, thinking about kind of Black internationalism. She's also here at that conference, with Du Bois and these other figures from the US. So in the kind of actual game, another thing we'll do is students will write more after this. They've written, if these were students, they would have written several assignments to help them prep for the game. They would have pulled in the core text and the supplemental text from the game book. And they would have used that in the class. We're playing an abbreviated version. We're not students, so it's different. But in the end, one of the things we want to know is, what did students learn? Of course, they have the game book with historical background. They have their kind of role sheet, biographies and objectives. But in the actual gameplay, what did you learn about the All-African People's Congress or decolonization? And I hope some of you learned something too, in spite of not being undergraduates.
So I noticed that one of the things I learned is that forming an alliance early is to your advantage. As I believe that if France Fanon had arrived much earlier, you would have been here and you would have said everything. This game would have ended very differently.
Well, I mean, you got the violence thing though, right? There was a positive vote for violence, and I mean, Sawaba, again, so players in the game around issues, Pan-Africanism, violence, they typically have like a pro-violence position or anti-violence, but some characters are indeterminate.
So the person playing that character has to determine, based on the biography, well, would my character support the use of violence? And Sawaba, you came out definitely in favor of violence in the game. And that changes the dynamics. If you're playing a larger version of this game, and depending who kind of shows up, right? If the other two South Africans have been here, Albert Hutchinson and Mary Louise Cooper, who's a white woman, but the representative of Albert Lafuli of the ANC, if they had showed up, they both would have been strong advocates of nonviolence. And that might have shifted the vote. So what else did you learn?
Okay, first I thought it was interesting to learn about Cameroon history and how different their struggle for independence was from ours in terms of the real violence. I mean, we had a lot, but they seem to have really a lot. And it reminded me of a film I watched about the independence movement around Niger and how in Africa, even though we may study our own history, I don't think we study enough about the other countries around us. We may know things like, oh, Ghana got independence there, Nelson Mandela, Kashiruba, but we don't know the stories that go around it. And so that's why I found this was interesting.
And I mean, that happens at the actual conference too, because, kind of Anglophone British Africa and Francophone French Africa, these movements and these people have not really come together in any kind of large degree until this conference. And the UPC situation is so tenuous because essentially there's now this French supported government advocating for independence there. And again, these kind of assassinations allude to the fact the French, and in fact, Nigeria has recently, so after the leadership of the UPC leaves French Cameroon, they come over to British Cameroon.
Yes.
So British Cameroon,
it's just across the river.
yeah, and in fact, the British ultimately, after a short period of time, expel these representatives of the UPC, but they also expel them with the consent of the Council of Ministers, the Nigerians who were participating in this government in the lead up to independence. So in fact, at the actual conference, Anthony Enoho is angry. He's angry that the UPC is being given a voice here. So there are definitely like real kind of tensions here in this event. What else did you learn?
So for me, just to echo what you said about not knowing about neighboring countries' histories, I was very shocked to find out that cocoa as a crop was not originally indigenous to Africa, that it came from Trinidad Bay. They asked me this in public, I would say it's impossible, but that was very interesting to find out.
Cocoa actually comes from the Americas.
Yes.
It's indigenized, or it's it's domesticated by kind of ancient indigenous people. It's really important to Mayan cosmology. Before 1492, before the rise of European colonialism, no one in Africa, Asia, or the US has had cocoa, tomatoes, potatoes, corn. These are all products from the Americas, and the same with peanuts in West Africa, right? Transplanted into the world.
Cassava.
And cassava. Oh, yeah.
Yes. So the curry that we eat is actually not indigenous to us. No, it's not. And it came back with the transatlantic. Yes, Japanese, yes.
So embedded in the core text are a lot of these kind of like colonial histories, economic histories, cultural histories.
I just would see a link between the past and the present.
Oh, good.
All the delegates, they have their ulterior motive of a kind.
In our objectives.
As we are coming to say we want freedom for Africa, each person has his own agenda. And lying on us that no other person can receive is our own selfish interest. And it's our selfish interest we are selling to people and thinking on whose self-interest would align with my own self-interest. I will form alliance.
Yeah.
And I think that is maybe what is still happening today.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of the things I think the game needs to get at too, is to reveal is not just this kind of like Pan-African continental wide discussion, but there are like all of these kind of like domestic histories and tensions that can play out in the game. In that bigger version of the game, there's 3 representatives from Nigeria. At the actual conference, there were 20. But in the game, there were representatives, NEPU, of course, the action group, NC, some trade unionists, no NPC representative was there. And even those 3 groups bear out some political tensions at that point,
I do.
that continue to play out, I think, right? Yeah.
Yes. Conference actually.
I need to check. Yes.
In fact, I think it's something with the eyes of the imperial. Hey, this is we get here, you can choose out. And why after that conference, it's not the next conference, never achieved the aim, the never achieved. But what we have,
Sorry.
more of the facilities that conference, associated. Playing for trying to control the state government, got to yourself. People at the point, not then advocating government, being this government for him, so the usual of him or what is that it actually create how it happens there. It helps us to understand the parts, the qualities of okay, why ourselves at that time say, okay, we'll be on a line and that, not knowing that go and Facebook, make sure this unites up. And it's today, and that's why there's usually one internal of the other.
But there's so much.
Nigeria, no speech now the last 20 years. If it's not in the south, then northwest, or the middle,
How will you send them to?
so this I just what we learn now.
them on the WhatsApp.
Never leave.
So, within the last year or two, this European friend here, he wrote a book called Tiny over Africa. He has something that the book is about how European powers, the US and Soviet Union, responded to the African political movements, but also how Burma, Canada, and others trying to interact. But he has a whole chapter in there that details the political, how superpowers, for instance, had to kind of like modify their approaches to colonialism, neo-colonialism to Africa based on what they saw happen at this conference. So the effects of the conference were, kind of global, certainly in scope. It wasn't just this happened, it required a response from everybody. So, no, don't turn it off. No, I'll take it off later. I'm going to come back at the end of the day and take those off. They have to be pulled off a certain way. And I don't want to get an issue of the law. I don't want to do. So